Welcome to AI Home Podcast, the first podcast for real estate resources and independent living strategies for the disability community. Why? Because accessibility is home. Hi, I'm Angela Fox, blogger, author, and your host. Now, let's begin. Hello, everyone. Again, this is Angela Fox, and I am sitting in my accessible wheelchair bathroom because at horizontalhouses.com, we know accessibility to a home goes beyond the bathroom. I have the fabulous guest named Hannah Magma, who is going to be providing us some information in regards to being a chartered special needs consultant. And for those joining us via my YouTube channel, I'd like to briefly describe what I look like. I am a middle-aged white woman with brown hair. I'm in an electric wheelchair with my headphones. I've got a pink striped shirt on, short sleeve, and I am literally in my handicap.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today, Angela. I have, chin-length brown hair, wearing a green jacket with a navy dress on under my green jacket. Thanks so much for having me.
I'll connect. And today, a little bit about you personally as well as professionally.
Yeah, I'm here in Northeastern Ohio. I've been a financial advisor for just about 12 years. Married, 3 kids. I also am a wheelchair user. I've been a wheelchair user for the last 4 to 5 years. But prior to that, used various other mobility aids. So rollator, AFOs, whatever you need to do to be able to go about your day.
In the past.
So certainly around COVID, I did a lot of advocacy as far as having our public school system safe for kids and my son to be able to attend, safety measures like masks. I've also done some federal level advocacy with the ELSA bill and working on trying to get that passed. It still has not passed yet, but that is a healthcare bill that will close some gaps that exist out there currently, which, for example, if you have a congenital disability, maybe affects your palate or your teeth, for example, it's fairly common for your health insurance that's dealing with your teeth. You need to go talk to your dentist. But I think many of us might know, or maybe we don't, that dental insurance is often not as comprehensive as your healthcare insurance. And so for individuals, particularly that have maybe ectodermal dysplasia, that might not have adult teeth or might be missing baby teeth, having your teeth really important to your health, many reasons. So working on closing that gap, that those individuals could have their health insurance cover it versus dental insurance, it's inadequate. And that's a small example of what that healthcare bill aims to do. But that's something that's really important to me for my family as well as for people that I care about, is making sure they can the care that they need through their health insurance.
So much of what done comes from health insurance disabled individuals, and I use in language. For those who you and I are, but for those who are not, a health fixing your wheelchair is really if something stops, meaning you can't get brand new time a toll or and one thing about what these are or not covered is super important, which is why I was so glad I ran into you, Hannah. Oh gosh, I think it was like Scope. And the aspect on what you need, whether it's on medical conditions you may have or your home. And I'm really excited for you to talk a little bit about what your role is. I'm not providing legal advice here, just like I'm a lawyer. I'm not providing legal advice here, but I think you telling, like, for example, what is a chartered needs consultant? What is that?
A chartered special needs consultant, which I carry that designation. It's available to individuals who are attorneys, CPAs, financial advisors. I would say most commonly financial advisors. I don't think I've ever met an attorney with the designation. I do know of one CPA that has the designation. There could be more that are out there. It's considered a rare designation. When I received the designation several years ago, and you get it from the American College of Financial Services, I remember my instructor saying at that time, including our class, that would have been less than 500 of us in the entire country that held the designation. For general financial advisors throughout the country, there was something like over 300,000 at that time. And it's such a specialized designation. There's not a lot of us that carry it, but it's the only designation that financial advisors can get that specifically address some of the planning considerations individuals with disabilities or special health care concerns might have.
I ran into you years ago because I could share a kind of experience. I bought my house, a one-level house, and trying to figure out, like, I knew the ABLE Act was coming, and financially how to plan out, whether it's because of my newly bought CPAs, and I'm in the DC area. They will, you're not legally tax write-off, anything other than they, how do I, at least, and maybe it's listening when it work with CPA, not gain all the assistance that you need, it's because there's only 500 of you. So how special is that I was able to run into you and you some of your wisdom with the audience. Is there anything more you can provide about some of the things that you do is about if you are a chartered special needs consultant?
So I can't speak for all of the chartered special needs consultant designation holders. I can only really speak to myself because I think we all work slightly differently. For myself personally, I'm also the parent of a medically complex child. So I know the benefits that my child receives really, really important, not just as a family as a whole, the financial benefit that comes to maybe not having to pay out of pocket for his G-tube formula, for example, it can really big impact for families. I work quite a bit on not just federal level benefits, but state level benefit, local benefits. We're not attorneys, so I can't draft a special needs trust for you, but I do know some of the language that we want to make sure that we see. How does that trust work as part of your plan? What should it pay for? What shouldn't it pay for? How much do we need to fund into that trust? When do we use an ABLE account? Do you need an ABLE account? How do those coordinate? It could be retirement planning for 3 people or some individuals I work with who are on benefits. It's how do we retain those benefits if you do want to work a little bit? What are some strategies that we might look at to accomplish that? So there's really a whole scope of things that I have worked with clients on their school benefits, for example. So I do not attend IEP meetings or things of that nature, but I've had clients that have paid quite a bit of money out of pocket for private tutoring because they didn't feel their kids were getting all the benefit that they needed in school. They didn't feel like they were getting all the services and support. And so I did help the families with the language they needed to request more services, to request an independent educator evaluation. As a result, though, that family was able to get that educator evaluation granted, which identified more needs that they did not know about previously, which meant they also did start to get the appropriate services in place. It's a very different kind of financial planning than people probably think about. And this type of plan really is much more complex and a much broader scope than people are familiar with.
And I think I love the fact example because I'll be honest, before we had talked offline, I was just thinking, advising, give me your bank account, what benefit do I receive, much you're talking about the ABLE Act. And real quickly, before I finish that thought, could you quickly tell the audience what the ABLE Act is? Because I know you've mentioned it and I've mentioned it.
Yeah, so it stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience. And so it would enact under sort of the same IRS codes that we would have seen, 529. But essentially what it does is it allows individuals who might be on programs that are resource driven to have an account that can hold more, maybe the $2,000 limitation. But essentially, these accounts, it's after-tax money. It goes into the ABLE account. Some states do give a state tax credit. That money can be invested. You can use a bank account within that option, just depending on your state and what options are available. And then when you take any money out, it has to be used for what's called qualified disability expenses. Those are really meant to be widely construed to benefit the individual. So the individual who the ABLE account is created for couldn't go out and buy mom and dad gifts from their ABLE account, but they could buy themselves clothes, food, things of that nature. Every state is a little bit different. Not every state yet has an ABLE account. If you are in a state that doesn't have one, many states allow for enrollment of out-of-state individuals. And ABLE accounts may or may not have Medicaid recovery. It depends on the state that you are in.
You give an example. We're talking about individuals for housing, whether you get housing or have you had any examples?
Well, housing expenses, if you use the ABLE, then you could get up to $100,000 into that ABLE account, not lose benefits. If the account goes over $100,000, it can pause benefits until the account value drops back. So housing expenses utilized from an ABLE account, there's a lot of reasons why you'd want to use an ABLE account over potentially a special needs trust to pay those housing expenses. If somebody's on SSI, so Supplemental Security Income, SSI has rules about housing or food being received for less than fair market value. So for those individuals, if they're on SSI, and let's say they're going to rent an apartment and they have a special needs trust that has money in it, they would not want to use their special needs trust to pay for their rent. If they're receiving SSI, it could reduce down their SSI by roughly a third. Whereas an ABLE account does not have those same rules. So an ABLE account could pay for their rent. It would not reduce down their SSI. The one nuance of an ABLE account is any money you take out of your ABLE account for housing expenses must be used in that month. You cannot carry it over. Also, anybody who's taking money out of their ABLE account to pay for rent or mortgage, just make sure you take it out, you apply it towards that rent, towards that mortgage in that same month, that you don't have a holdover on it. I have had clients who have wanted to use an ABLE account for a down payment on a house. There are two entities that really audit ABLE accounts. It's the IRS or Social Security. We might have them reach out to the state to verify it's going to be okay, because that ABLE account needs to be used for the disabled individual's benefit. That may or may not be a problem. They make sure that you confirm that if you have a situation that might be a little bit more gray, so you don't incur any issues on that front. If it's a single individual, it's their house, they're buying an accessible house, that's a little bit of an easier answer versus buying a house that might also benefit some other people.
And that's under if they have Social Security, that you're concerned about them losing their benefits. Because
it's really twofold. SSI looks at your room and board, your housing, your food, if you're getting that for less than fair market value or free. But there are people that might use ABLE accounts that are not on SSI. Maybe they're on SSDI. Maybe they're on other benefits that they need to protect, such as waivers or things of that nature. So, and just making sure that ABLE account, even if you're not on SSI, you make sure that when you're using that money, it's being used for the benefit of the individual with a disability. If it could be construed to be beneficial to somebody else, really want to review that and make sure it's going to be okay, so you don't incur any penalties from the ABLE account.
It could be inferred and interpreted. A lot of guys out there. And I think IRS purpose. It's exciting, but it can be very confusing. So I'm always interested on other people's perspective and how they use it. So definitely think it needs help with housing or aging in place? Is there any considerations about making housing accessible for visitors of the home?
Yeah, so homeownership's a real goal for lots of people. But within the disabled community, it's much more difficult, several fronts. So I wasn't always disabled. I've been disabled for about 9 years now. And I will tell you, as someone who went through the home buying experience as an able bodied individual, the normal financial consideration that I could just look at houses that fit in my budget. And I didn't have to think about how many stairs there were or doorways or anything of that nature. And now we purchased the house that we currently live in after my disability occurred. Really, my husband and I immediately would only look at ranches. We would not look at two-story houses. Even if a ranch had a step or two, we could get a ranch. We could pay extra money to put a ramp in, but you start look at structural stuff. So if it wasn't already accessible, really as a disabled individual, we had to look at what would that house cost, but then what additional costs would we have to do the things that we would do to make it accessible, put ramps in, make doorways wider, roll in showers, things of that nature. We are starting to see people plan and do more age in place homes because I think people really realize the more accessible your house is, the longer you're likely to be able to stay in the house. So we are starting to see some of that naturally come about. Within this segment, it can also be individuals who maybe are on housing voucher. What options might they have beyond a traditional home buyer? So really quite a bit out there to consider beyond just, does a house have a ramp? Does a house not have a ramp? We might also go, does a trust need to own the house? Does a trust not need to own the house? What are the things that we should look at?
And now a quick break from our sponsor. So as you can see and also hearing me, I am sitting on my back deck and I have my grill. I love being out in my back deck. I hate when I forget something and I have to wheel back into the house, particularly my cell phone. However, I'm excited to announce that another disabled owned business, Cush Pocket, has come up with a solution by creating this fabulous wheelchair bag. I love this bag and have been a proud customer since almost the very beginning. Why do I like it? One, it's huge. Two, it comes in multiple colors. But three, you can put it anywhere on the base of your wheelchair. How does that happen? It's attached to the flap and it has little Velcro. You put it directly underneath your cushion of your wheelchair. And the Velcro and the weight of your body ensures that this fabulous Cush Pocket bag certainly will not move. I personally have two directly in front of me and it hides behind my legs, and I love that because it's so much more convenient. Trust me, you will never forget anything ever again. So as you can see down below, I have a direct link for Cush Pocket, and if you use my code Angela Fox, you will get $1 off. And not only will you get a fabulous bag, but you'll also support two disabled-owned businesses, Cush Pocket and my business, Horizontal Houses. Check it out. What is the benefits of putting a house within a trust?
Yeah, so I would definitely say there's no hard, fast rule that everybody should do it or shouldn't do it. But I will often see family, maybe mom and dad own a house and their adult child has a special needs trust that mom and dad created for them. And maybe it doesn't have any money in it while mom and dad are alive. Maybe they want their adult child to be able to retain the home, stay in the home for their entire lifetime. They might choose to put the house in the trust, the trustable to assist with needed maintenance on the home, and also just to make sure it's not an asset that could be recovered by Medicaid one. Maybe there are other kids that if the disabled individual were to pass away, they'd want to make sure the house would go to. So there can be a lot of reasons why somebody might consider it, but we also have clients who don't have the house in the trust. The right answer for one person's the right answer for that person.
Yeah.
We can also talk about if the trust does need to own the house, if the attorney has really got that to the best solution, how much do we need to fund into that trust then? How does that work? What does that need to look like?
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. Depends on the situation, but those are possibilities of when people may or may not do it. I mean, it's very situational. You guys said how it's consultant is kind of cashier in a way, in my terms, a
Yeah.
cashier of addressing issues that individuals with disabilities outside of just the scope of financial advice. So with that in mind, what are some resources out there Joel, to either buy a home or pay for the modifications because they became disabled and have their home? Have you ever dealt with that and been able to provide any resources on?
I would say very, very state specific. So for example, waiver system, depending on the state, depending on the individual, could be a resource to help pay for those home modifications. So waiver really born out of the Olmstead Act, stating that individuals with disabilities should be able to live in the community that they desire and receive the resources that they need within the community. Waiver program can do bathroom modifications, can put ramps in, can put stair chairs in, can do things like that. Sometimes not everyone's going to qualify for a waiver, or maybe they're going to sit on a waiver wait list for a really long time. It depends on, there's sometimes we'll even look, is there local funding that might be available? Is there any other funding that could exist out there that could help that individual put the...
And one thing that I try to guide individuals, whether the real estate agents or individuals who are disabled and make modifications to the home, is this idea of doing it in a mindful to bring value to the home. You, from financial aspect, as fight to the audience about how a house investment can increase by making it accessible or universally designed.
Look at, depending on the improvements somebody might do, if there are any tax benefits that they might be able to capture, such as medical expense deductions, capital improvement costs, if it's related to making a house accessible. So we do look at that stuff. We do calculate it. It also helps to determine what assets we might use to pay for those things. We might work with a client who doesn't have any disabilities yet, but maybe that's on the horizon. So knowing that there's some sort of genetic factor that places them at a higher risk, or clients who are starting to get older potentially, and they're starting to think of some of that investment in a home. That certainly is something that has come up. I tend to see, just as an individual who lives in an accessible home, who has lots of friends who in this community and friends who are not in this community, we hear quite often, because our house is a big ranch house on a street with double front doors and zero entry, of just the number of people that put a bid on this house when it went on the market, strictly because it was accessible. So people are looking for that. If you're building a house and you're not disabled today, you never know when you get to join this club. Some consideration into what could I do to make sure that's an option for me, whether I build that as an option today or down the road. People do look for that.
There is that buying power. There is marketability, whether or not disabled now or, like you said, they are thinking. So I just love to hear real life examples. And that's part of the reason why I do this podcast, because I can shout to the wind. And the disabled community has always tried to get Congress to help pass a federal law requiring sector housing to be accessible.
I have clients that are going into nursing homes. I also do elder care planning. And I work in several states throughout the country. So even though I'm in Northeastern Ohio, I work with clients in various states virtually through Zoom. We're seeing nursing home costs be $14,000, depending where you're at, depending on your needs. And so you're right. We're seeing more and more families fight to stay at home because that is an exponential cost. And it is less expensive to stay in your home and hire in help, not in every case, but in many cases, versus going into a nursing home. Even for individuals without disabilities, that can derail a retirement plan or an estate plan or if you are faced with going into a nursing home early.
Yeah. And to even add, I read a statistic something like for every year that you are staying home, you get additional years of quality life. That this idea that nursing homes are somehow more safer for you, really not. You just get the whole that you need because to be more isolated, you're exposed to more diseases. We saw that during COVID. I think it's hard for people to when you got a mortgage, you have to pay for somebody to come into the home. I do have a question because I'm always about data. Have you done any research at any financial data about the disability community discretionary income that they have?
Actually, the American Institute for Research did a study that shows the disability community has the same amount of discretionary income related to any other marginal community. People often don't think of the forced poverty, essentially, that many disabled individuals have to live in. But I'm disabled. I'm not on SSI. I'm not on SSDI. I have extra money I'd like to spend, but if you've got stairs in front of your business, I'm not going to be able to get in there to spend that money. And I don't think people always realize that we do have a similar amount of spending power as some other marginal communities. We're also a community that anyone could end up joining at any point in their life, which is fairly uncommon. You could go, oh, I'm never going to be disabled. And then in the blink of an eye, it could. And so really the advocacy that we do is not just for us. It might be for you. It might be for your loved one. I've often said, if you want to learn how to advocate really well, talk to a disabled person. Even if that disabled person's never done like official advocacy or worked on this bill, chances are they've fought insurance before and they're probably going to know how to do it better than just about anybody else out there.
I think in cases, then why people concept of disabled community being in poverty is that all based on numbers and your perspective. And what I mean by that is I'm working with real estate agents and they're like, I want to deal with vouchers. And I'm like, talking about the sector housing, disabled. I think a lot of individuals have this belief of poverty level. It's because technically, if you are disabled, you higher probability that poverty compared to other minorities. If you look at the population of itself, there's a bigger chunk of population that's in poverty compared to African Americans or women. But the problem with that, if you just stop there, and a lot of nonprofits, that's what they focus on. Hey, you're more likely to be poverty if you're disabled compared to other minorities. Population has a portion of poverty, and they use that to rightfully justify addressing need. And that's great. But the problem is that's the only narrative.
If you think about it from a personal perspective, if you go to a doctor, often the exam table is not accessible. And if you can't get up on that table, they might not be able to do a full exam. I came from the healthcare world, and you would sometimes see doctors hesitate to ask a wheelchair user to take their shoes off, to be able to look at their feet, or to do things like that because of this perceived inconvenience. Every time I go to just my annual doctor checkup, they'll say, are you able to get on the scale, or do you not want to get on the scale? And I'm like, I am fortunate that I can stand if I'm holding on to something for a period of time. It's really important to have an accurate weight if you need medication, the right dosage. It's just little things like that. Yeah, I could see where our healthcare may not be as comprehensive as it should be. I have a wonderful doctor now. That's my caveat. He is very proactive with doing everything. But I've absolutely seen cases where We're not even going to try to get you on the exam table, or we're not going to look at your feet, or we're not going to do the full scope of exam that we would have done for somebody else who is able-bodied.
Yep. And it's why HHS finally have dated just this past year the 504 rule, requiring now any facility that receives funds for the federal government to make sure that the equipment is accessible for the disability.
Yeah.
And that has never been done in 50 years.
Yeah.
So probably going to take another 50, everything to actually that way. It's funny. People often ask, like, with all the additional maintenance and headaches that you can have when owning a home, like, why didn't I just rent? And I'm like, I can make my house fully accessible to meet my needs. It is like my oasis from an inaccessible world. You know?
My home is fully accessible to me. I can do everything I need to do in my house, but I do public speaking engagements, and I've done those throughout the country. And I tell my husband sometimes when we've traveled, I feel my disability more, not because I am more disabled, because my environment is not accessible. So the things that my husband wouldn't need to help me with at home, he now all of a sudden has to help me with. It's the problem that grab bars are at the wrong height, or doorways are too narrow, or there's a step, or whatever that might be, is a really good example of the environment it is what the barrier is. It's not my inability to walk.
Yep. We have not talked about what are some factors, questions should an individual be looking when trying to find a charter special needs consultant?
Yeah. So, like I said, I can't speak for how other people do it. I think it's very important that it is, if it's not the sole focus of their practice, it is a major focus of their practice. So this is really the only planning I do. I still have general financial planning clients, but I'd say probably almost all my new business happens to be in this space and has been in this space for many years because the rules change. So if you only help someone occasionally, you might not be as up to date with rules, because I have worked with so many clients in so many states now. There's a little nuances that you learn every case that you work on, every client that you work with, their scenario very unique to them. I'm not just an advisor who feels a passion in this space. I'm also a family who has had to deal with stuff in this space. My 10-year-old's medically complex. I'm a wheelchair user, so I don't just understand it from a professional perspective. I understand it from a personal perspective. Is one thing that makes me a little bit different is I have some perspective there and some understanding. I've had to do state level appeals for my son. I know what that looked like. I've worked in these impossible systems. So I would say that the biggest thing that somebody should look for is a chartered special needs consultant who it's not a major focus of their practice, is the only focus of their practice. It should be a bulk of what their planning is annually to make sure that their skills are sharp. Just because any other skill, right? The more often you're doing it, the better your skill is, the more up to date you are on the planning that needs to be done, the rules that might change, things of that nature.
Okay. With a charter special consultant, do you have a certificate or thing that you can request?
Yeah, and I have ongoing annual continuing education that I need to do. I have ongoing ethics requirements. In order to hold the designation, you must have been a financial advisor for a period of time, or an attorney, or a CPA. I have other designations as well beyond that. You have to complete a course of study. You have several tests that you have to take. You have to meet a minimum requirement to be able to get it.
Okay. Where can someone go look for a child special needs consultant, like in their state?
Now, I know that there are some designation search engines that do exist out there. And I would also say you don't necessarily need something that's in your backyard. said, I'm in Northeastern Ohio, but I work with clients in Colorado and Florida, Pennsylvania, and throughout the country. You can also search CHSNC designation holder, but don't let your location limit you because there's not a lot of us. When I started work in Colorado at the time, there just wasn't any that were close to where the clients needed them because there is a large integrated housing community out there. So don't just limit it to who's in your backyard. You can also look who might be a good fit for me really anywhere, who might be licensed in your state.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
I think podcasts like that are really important. This is a community that anybody can become a part of at any point in their life. So the more accessible the world is today, if that does happen to you, it will be easier for you one day. That's really my goal, is to make the world a little bit easier for people like me and for my son, Corbin, that he hopefully will not have the same struggles that I have to experience because I've worked really hard to try to remove those barriers or do the things that I could do a little bit more accessible.
Well, I love doing these podcasts because I get like yourself making those advocacy and asking for change, but then to be able to provide a service really at the same time. And that's what you're doing as being a chartered special needs consultant. HorizontalHouses.com is the hub for all things related to disability home ownership. You will find my blog, this podcast, my book, and how my consulting services can help real estate agents or housing developers market and tap into the largest minority group, the disability community. Please help me continue this exploration of disability home ownership by connecting through my Facebook page. Remember, sharing our collective experiences will allow us each to lower the kitchen sink but raise the bar for disability home ownership. Thank you.